Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking about a fairly special piece of real estate today, an isthmus of land that bridges the Americas. There are about 200 nations in the world. What about the opportunity to invest outside your home nation and earn a rate of return? It's about the ease and affordability of owning a tropical tiny home, coming at you with the National Geographic feel today on Get Rich Education. A lot of investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market could provide both. Jacksonville, Florida, with 27% lower home prices than the national median and 1% higher rents, their market has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. They often have available inventory in Jacksonville. Start at cashflowandgrowth.com. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your EQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an EQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from La Rochelle, France to New Rochelle, New York, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. As much as we discuss the best investment markets here on the show, many of them, which tend to be in the United States, Midwest, and South, they're not those vacation type of destinations. Now, you might be thrilled that your single-family rental in Dayton, Ohio has a nearly 1% rent-to-value ratio today, but it's also unlikely that you're going to ask your tenant to leave so that you can live there yourself for a month. With what we're discussing today, it can be profitable, and you may very well want to use the property for your own pleasure yourself. Now, when we pull back and take a world view, the United Nations has 193 member countries, and in fact, there really is no global consensus view on how many world nations there are, because different member bodies recognize different degrees of sovereignty. But suffice to say, with there being about 200 nations in the world, how many are you going to invest in? Are you content in only owning some of the dirt in your own home nation? Well, maybe you are, and maybe you want more than that. Now, to an American, one advantage that Dayton, Ohio, or Ocala, Florida has is relative familiarity to you. Before you invest outside your home nation, you've got to do your due diligence on some things that you might otherwise take for granted. And if you had to take all of that on by yourself, well, then that could seem daunting. Does your foreign property have road access in the rainy season? Did you even think about rainy season? Is there sufficient infrastructure, like even the water pressure inside your property? And what about really important things like safety and community and the track record of the developer and the standards that they build to? Well, for years, I've dealt with a company that's operated in the Central American region for 25 years, including where we're talking about today, Panama. They've got that track record. They secure the infrastructure. And as an experienced operator, they help walk you through this and more, and make it like investing outside of your home nation with training wheels on. And what we're discussing today has an extremely affordable price point, as you're going to learn. Panama has very friendly people. They are in the top 10 on the world's happiness index. It has one of the lowest crime rates, and it's among the safest countries in all of the Americas. And it also has the highest GDP per capita in Central America. Panama has one of the strongest economies in the region in really accommodating international banking laws. There's excellent infrastructure there, like their roads and their power systems. and they really have a widely varied geography and biodiversity. In fact, in Panama, I have sweated profusely while at sea level, and my feet have tread on frosted ground. Panama has world-class healthcare at a fraction of the cost of U.S. healthcare. Now, despite that Panama has a lot of beaches, I mean, you've got both the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean in a fairly small country, be clear that we are not talking about beachscape properties today. These properties are in Panama's Highlands in Cherokee Province, where they have the most comfortable temperatures of any place that I've been in the nation. And we are talking about a rich, lush, green landscape with tons of flora. It's not one of those places where after a few years some people say, oh gosh, I just cannot take the heat anymore. That's not what we're talking about here. The tropical Highlands community is pretty conveniently located between the popular cities of Boquete and David. So you're still within a driving distance of the city of David, which has a population of 80 to 100,000, and within driving distance of the coast if you wanted to go to a beach. Now, to be clear, though, you would have to drive there from this location where these tropical tiny homes are near Boquete. And these places have amazing 270-degree mountain views and just all these natural creeks and streams running in the area and even through the property, as well as communal orchards and gardens. And this is really the ideal location if you're a nature lover or just enjoy a quiet setting. With your tiny home, you also have the option of joining the rental program and earning rental revenue when you're not using the home yourself. These are hybrid solar, wind, and grid-powered tiny homes. Smart home technology is available should you so choose. These places are really smartly designed. Graywater recycling waters your garden. Organic food is grown on site. And yes, there is that all-important high-speed internet. There's a real sense of community there. There's a restaurant and pool area, a palapa for yoga, which really just means a covered open-air area. Hiking trails are right there, and then the river David is on site. So it's almost a one-of-a-kind opportunity to own a beautiful tiny home that's brand new construction in a gated community in Panama's tropical highlands. And it is about a mile high in elevation around Boquete. Now, I've hiked to over, like I said, 11,000 feet high in Panama. And you know, one of the most interesting and unexpected landscapes that I found there is that even when I hiked to 8,000 to 9,000 feet in elevation, the landscape was still what most North Americans would consider jungly up there with tall trees and vines. So it was just amazing to see that. Now, this tiny home community isn't nearly that high in elevation. This is some pretty dreamy stuff here, and it's educational to learn about. There's an opportunity for you here too, so let's put on our Panama Jack hat and think about tropical tiny homes. You've become more familiar with today's guest because she's been here with us a few times over the years, telling us about how foreigners can easily own and hold title to teak hardwood plantation parcels and tropical tiny homes in Latin America. And part of her history is that years ago, she was on a medical school track and took a 180-degree turn when one thing led to another, and she began in Latin American real estate in 2012, where she's gone on to do award-winning work. I first met her in person in 2016. She's originally from the New York City suburbs, and she lives in Central America today. She's a global traveler and an active real estate investor herself. Welcome back to Get Rich Education, Rachel Jensen.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's awesome to be back on the Get Rich Education podcast. I do have to admit, this is one of my favorite podcasts to record with. You're just so much fun and a wealth of knowledge, and you have really incredible listeners too. So thank you for having me back.
Well, you're becoming a favorite guest too. And last time you were here, we discussed tiny home communities in Belize, Nicaragua, and Panama. And each one of those have their different attractions and pros and cons. But Panama is where your newest tiny home community is. Of those three nations I mentioned, Panama is probably the one with, I'll say, the greatest legacy of relations and familiarity with those in the United States, largely because of the canal. In Panama, many things are indeed priced in U.S. dollars. In fact, the local currency there is even pegged 1-to-1 to the U.S. dollar. So Americans feel quite comfortable investing in Panama. So tell us more about the tiny home community there in Panama, Rachel.
Panama is a really fascinating country, and because of the strong history, and I think it's a very comfortable place for a lot of us because we have heard about it. It's a stable place. It has a strong economy. As you mentioned, the Panama Canal essentially acts as an ATM machine for the country. So there's strong infrastructure there, and it's just a place that many people feel comfortable investing. And then the country of Panama is really unique too, because there are just so many different microclimates and geographies within the country. There's Panama City, which is this big metropolitan area where you have the skyscrapers. And I think there are like 68 international banks that are based there in the city. And you have the Panama Canal. Then you have more of the beach communities where you have Coronado on the Pacific and Bocas del Toro and San Blas on the Caribbean side. And then you also have the tropical highlands. And the tropical highlands are a really attractive area for people who may not necessarily like the heat and humidity in places like the city or on the coastal towns. But there you have the cooler climates, low 80s during the day, 70s during the nighttime. So you have more of cool climates. And within the area of the highlands, you have more of the jungle scape. So you have the hiking areas, whitewater rafting. I know, Keith, that this probably is a perfect place for you. I know you've been there before, but you have more of the outdoor sort of activities that a lot of people really do enjoy. For us as a development company, we've been in the region for about 25 years at this point. And all of our properties, with this exception, but all of our properties are beachfront places on the Caribbean or the Pacific. And so when we were looking for a new property and identifying where it was we wanted to be, Panama was a no-brainer just because of the strong history there. We're very comfortable working in a country like Panama. We have with some of our other properties since 1999. And so we really feel comfortable there. And so we identified Boquete. It's great coffee growing region, great chocolate growing region, a lot of that outdoor sort of activity, but we found the perfect property about a year and a half ago and have officially launched it. We had an unofficial release about 4 or 5 months ago. And then just the other night, we had an official opening of this opportunity. So we're really excited to be offering real estate in Boquete.
We're talking about a new community of tiny homes that's been built in Boquete. I was in Boquete in 2015. It's in the western portion of Panama. Walking around Boquete and its environs, it just always seems like there's some little brook running through this lush green area. You are in the highlands, like you say, so you've really escaped the warmer places that you do if you're in more of a beachy area. So you really are up there in the highlands of Boquete. Tell us more about the types of people that enjoy owning these sorts of tropical tiny homes. Now, I would imagine that people have the option to be an owner-occupant, to own and live in their tiny home. But I imagine a lot of people that are attracted to these tiny homes might live in them for a couple weeks a year and then rent them out on a short-term basis to others. So tell us about that clientele. Who's actually staying in the tiny homes?
Sure. And I'm even going to take it one step back. So we see from the ownership perspective. So who's owning the homes? We see three different groups primarily. We see the owners who want to get out of the rat race in the U.S. or their home country and move down to Panama or to their tiny home full time. They're planning for it to be their full-time residence. We have the people who are doing their homework now or they're preparing for the future. They'll own the home now, use it as an investment, maybe come and go every now and again. But then their ultimate goal is to relocate there maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the line. But they want to get in now while real estate prices are what they're at before they continue to increase. And then we have the investor. And the investor is the person who identifies that Boquete or whatever region is a great area to invest in. And they're primarily doing this from an investment perspective. For a lot of the investors, they actually don't even come down and visit the area because for them, I mean, really, when you think about it, investment, it doesn't really matter if you like it personally, right? It really just depends if a majority of people like it. And if a majority of people like it and the numbers make sense, then hey, it makes a great investment. And I think for a lot of people, I know for me personally, like sometimes it's hard to separate what you like, the lifestyle buying and the investment buying. And it's so easy, especially in these cute tropical places to go and be like, oh, I really, really like this. But what do you like it for? Do you like it for yourself or do you like it for an investment? But from the investment perspective, the people, some of them, like I said, don't even come down. Some do come down just to get a lay of the land. But we've seen that that's really the three types of buyers. And then when it comes to the renters, like who would be staying in these homes if an owner did decide to rent the home, we would have overnight guests, so vacationers who are coming through. It's pretty common when people are vacationing in Panama to spend time in the city, spend time on the coast, and then in the Highlands. Because Panama is such a safe country, it's the fourth safest country out of the 33 Latin American countries. We do find a lot of tourists coming. They'll rent cars. They'll take the plane over to Boquete. They'll rent a car there, drive around. And so we have those overnight tourists. And then also the people who are staying for longer periods of time. And whether it's the snowbird from Canada who's coming down for 4 or 6 months and want to get out of the snow or the cold in those winter months, or what we've been seeing more now are the digital nomads. And with this decoupling of work and an office, like where you're working in the office, right, more people are realizing, why am I staying in cold Iowa? Why don't I go down to the tropics? I have great internet. I can still get my work done from there. Then I can go hiking at Volcano Baru and enjoy that. And so there's been this real decoupling that's happened over the past year. And more people are realizing that they can get their job done from their computer and they don't have to be in one specific location to get it done. I think that would be another demographic to consider. And they're not necessarily vacationers. They're not there for a week or two. They're not necessarily snowbirds or long-term rentals because they're not there for 6+ months. They're for 2-3 months at a time. And who knows, maybe they'll hop over to Nicaragua. They'll hop up to Belize, go to Colombia. Who knows? But at least they're able to experience life in another country while getting their job done and getting paid.
That's right. And when we talk about who we're serving and who's staying in these places, oftentimes, and whether you as the listener, whether you have these thoughts or feelings or desires or you don't, a lot of people are interested in reducing their carbon footprint and living eco-consciously. Sometimes that might be the investor owner. Sometimes that might be the person staying there, or both.
Exactly. And with the homes, we've labeled these tiny homes as test home, tiny, eco-friendly, smart. So tiny, you can understand why square footage. They're typically between 300 to 400 square feet. Although in Panama, we did release 2 new models that are about 600 square feet of interior space. And then exterior, one of the models has about 1,000 square feet of exterior space when you include the balcony and the patios and the decks, because in the tropics, we live outside. Everything that we really do is outside. We go inside to use the restroom and go to sleep. Everything else is outside. So these are, I'd say, larger tiny homes, but they still encompass that tiny home model. But then the E stands for eco-friendly. And, like you said, Keith, whether or not you're a believer in or you're looking to reduce your carbon footprint, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, if you could save money on your electricity or your utility bills, would you? I mean, you probably would. And so by having your home be eco-friendly, you're able to accomplish that. We do have solar panels on the roofs. We also have the option for the homes to be totally off-grid if people want to be, or they can be connected. It can be a hybrid system. So for those who aren't really comfortable with totally going off-grid, at this point, they can still be connected to the grid. But having graywater recycling, so using the water from your sink and shower and using that to water your garden, for example, and then green roofs. And green roofs are really great from an insulation perspective. And because of the location in the tropics, you might have your AC on and the green roof will help keep it cooler in the home, so saving on the electricity. But there are a lot of different factors that go into what makes a home eco-friendly, eco-conscious. For us, we look at it also from the business perspective. Of course, we want to be able to save money, but also what good can we do for the environment? I think all of us want to leave the world a better place than we found it. And, it's baby steps. It's just doing little things throughout our life that really can make that happen. And then the S stands for smart. So you are able to add and integrate smart features into your tiny home. You don't have to. That's a choice. That's up to you. But smart features would include like a smart thermostat, for example. So from your phone, you'd be able to control the air conditioning. Let's say you decided to go on a hike of Volcano Baru again, and you realize you left your air conditioning at 72 degrees. Well, what you can do from your phone is turn it off so that you're conserving the energy. In addition to that, let's say you were hiking and you lost your key somewhere on the path, but you can come back on your phone, you'll be able to unlock your door. So there are these features that you are able to get integrated into the house. I know some people like Alexa, some people don't, but you're able to get Alexa integrated. So there really are really unique features about it. And going back to the sustainability part for a second and the eco-conscious part, one of my favorite things and considerations about this property is the fact that we're integrating teak features into the homes. So many of you have heard the podcast before where we talked about ownership of teak land. And there you're able to own your own parcel of teak. You get title to it. You own the land, you own the trees. Then we sell it for you on behalf of you, and then you earn the profits from it. But what we're going to be doing is integrating that teak into construction of the homes. So the homes will have this really beautiful hardwood integrated in the beams and in the flooring and the outdoor decking. So they're going to be really incredible homes at the end of the day. So whether you're going to live there or just have it in an investment, that's going to be a very durable quality home.
All right. In a way, you're integrating the teak investing with the tiny home. And yes, the TESS acronym that you've talked about for this new tiny home community in the Highlands of Panama, tiny, eco-friendly, and smart. Gotta love that. These are big tiny homes, 600 square feet, so not too tiny. And yes, I know oftentimes you do some of those smart things, turn a stairway into a set of drawers that pull out and things like that to magnify the efficiencies in such a small space that you have like that. And importantly, I think the word community really is something important. This isn't just an isolated home off somewhere where there might not be very much to do, right? It's a community of tiny homes where there might be some collective things where everyone in the community can do those things integrated and built in there.
Exactly. And for us as a development company, our core model is building communities. And for those of you listening, you may have heard of Del Webb. He was a very famous developer of retirement communities throughout North America. And he first started in Arizona. But what he realized is not every retiree wanted to live in Arizona. And so what he did is he built these communities specifically for retirees in 21 different states throughout the United States. And it just became huge. He ended up selling to Pulte for about 1.1 billion, I believe it was. And what he really capitalized and captured was this fact that when people relocated somewhere or were living somewhere, they wanted this sense of community. And so actually, when our company first started 25 years ago, it was really modeled off of this Del Webb concept of creating different geographic communities throughout Latin America. And it was really geared towards retirees 25 years ago. Over the last 10, 12 years, it's become much more diverse in terms of demographics. We have some retirees. We have a lot of investors. We have people, the youngest person who invested, I think he was like 28, 29 when he invested in a home. The oldest was in his 90s. So there's a huge demographic of buyers, but we're just seeing this concept of community. We keep coming back to this concept of community because when people are relocating or vacationing, they are looking for a place to go to, something to do. And within this whole property, so the whole Panama property is called Grand Highlands. And then within Grand Highlands, there are different neighborhoods, and this tiny home community is one of the different neighborhoods. But within Grand Highlands, we've allocated space for an orchard, a community garden, an artisan market. So we're able to bring in the locals who are maybe making hammocks or jewelry, or perhaps if you're living there and you have a hobby, let's say you like making pickles or candles, you can go sell your products there at the artisan market. There are already hiking trails on site. There's an incredible river. It's more of a creek, but incredible river that you can go swimming in. There's an orange grove already growing, and it's producing fantastic tasting oranges. So that, in addition to a palapa, I think I mentioned a pool, but all of these different spaces really at the end of the day bring together the community. And in the developing world, we call it third spaces. They're the third spaces where people are able to congregate and come together. And going back to one of the other points that I made was that we're in the tropics. So a lot of the living happens outdoors. So having yoga platforms, having bird watching stations or towers where people are able to go up and watch the birds is pretty important. And the fact we're able to do it all outside is even better. So bringing the community together and having that sense of community is really quite neat. And I live in Belize right now. I think maybe I'll end up in Panama and then the near future. But what I've realized here from living overseas as an expat is you do look for community when you relocate. And whether or not you have anything in common hobby-wise, let's say the person, the expat sitting next to you, the one thing you do have in common is that you both left your home to come and make a new life in Belize. You realize you have this instant connection with somebody that you're sitting next to because you're both in the same boat. You both decided to come to Belize, leave behind what you had there, and then you can start that connection. And it's the same thing in all of our communities as we find the owners have this real like-minded mentality. They're looking to diversify their assets. They don't want all their eggs in one basket, as we've all heard before. They tend to be a little bit more adventurous because they're looking in another country. And they're people who really think outside the box. They're people who look at markets on a more international scope. So they tend to be pretty well traveled the owners of these homes and or people who are just curious about traveling and wanting to get involved somehow. So it's a really neat community at the end of the day, Keith. I'm glad that you mentioned that, but community on so many different levels.
Well, it's such an important thing to say because maybe some people see it in their mind's eye as I want to buy an inexpensive tropical tiny home in Panama and just retire and do nothing the rest of my life. No, I don't think you really want to do absolutely nothing. It's nice to have a community of like-minded people with activities from hiking to bird watching to tending to your orchard or whatever else you're doing there. That's why it's such an important part of this. Rachel and I are going to come back. We're going to talk more about who actually manages these residency opportunity for you and more. You're listening to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. You know, starting in real estate seems hard for some. Even experienced investors can find it difficult to achieve the success that they had hoped for. What if there was one small change everyone could make that would solve these challenges? Allie Boone offers a book that really no one else has. It's an easy-to-understand glimpse into the real estate investing industry and your mindset. It's life lessons on hacking your mind before you hack your wallet. Her book to grab on Amazon is called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing.
This is the Real Wealth Network's Kathy Fettke, and you are listening to the always valuable Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold.
Welcome back to GRE. We're talking with Rachel Jensen about tropical tiny homes in Panama. And this new tropical tiny home community is located in Boquete, Panama. It's up in the Highlands. Temperatures are cooler. It's a really comfortable place. My one trip to Boquete just included some great treks. In Boquete, it just seems like these big 50-foot tall trees grow that have these big, beautiful flowering arrangements blossoming off the end of them that I've never seen before. Boquete is truly one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. So it's thrilling to talk about really affordable housing in a place like this. But Rachel, as we know, what happy home ownership comes down to over time is kind of that ease of management and someone doing some of those duties for us and making sure everything's operating and making sure that rent incomes flow and so on. So can you tell us more about how the management is integrated into the community, especially for those investors?
So we will have an in-house rental management company. It is turnkey. Over the years of development, what we realized and understood is that especially for owners, absent owners who aren't in the country, it's very, very difficult to manage a property. So we first started in the rental management business in 1998. And so we're carrying that over to Panama and able to provide that turnkey solution for our owners. You know, I have had a couple of people ask me about Airbnb, and I think Airbnb has jaded a lot of us. Because especially if you're living in an area that you have an Airbnb rental where you're able to easily manage it, or maybe you have a manager that you can trust there. But if you're not living in the location, it's just very difficult to make sure that it's being rented properly, being managed properly, that your guest is having a great experience. For us, it's really about the experience of the client or the guest who's coming in. So we want to really be able to personalize that. But we do have an in-house rental management company. They take care of everything. We put together performas based on what we expect rentals to look like, based on past performance in the area. And so if anybody is interested in seeing that, just feel free to reach out to us, and we're certainly able to tell you about that.
Is there anything else that a prospective buyer, investor would need to know? Perhaps if they've never invested outside their home nation before, sometimes there's just still those questions there, like, is there something to know that I'm not even asking about? So is there something that oftentimes that foreign investors find out maybe after they bought that they didn't realize previously that might help them be more familiar and comfortable with the investment?
Yes, I have a couple of points. The first one is that as a foreigner, you are able to get title to your property. So there are some countries where you're not able to get title. You either need to put it in a local company or you need to find a local business partner who would be majority partner in the business. But in this case, in Panama, you are able to be the owner of your property and get title to your property. So I think that that's really important to consider. In addition to that, I want to talk about self-directed IRAs, because this is something that is important, especially for our savvy investors who know that they can use their self-directed IRA overseas. Panama does not recognize self-directed IRA custodians as legal entities to own title. So if you wanted to use your self-directed IRA for this home ownership, what I would recommend doing is opening up a Panama corporation, a local Panama corporation, and your self-directed IRA would be the owner of that Panama corporation. And then the Panama corporation can be the owner of that home. So that's the loophole. But just understand that there are extra expenses with that. I think it's about $1,500, $1,800 US to set up that Panama corporation. And then you will have ongoing fees of about $800. So just something to bear in mind, that there is a loophole to it, but it will just cost you a little bit more. The third point I want people to know is that Latin America generally is very slow with things. And one of the best pieces of advice I had when I moved to Belize was pack your patience. And that can be applied to any of the countries down here, just because systems and processes are a lot slower. Bureaucratic slowness is a real thing. And especially in Panama, there are a ton of holidays. So definitely don't expect anything to be happening over Easter week. Like Easter week, nobody is working. The 2 weeks, Christmas into New Year's, nobody's working. And there just tends to be all of these holidays. So where I'm going with that is titling from your property. You do get title to your property, but it will take time. It's not uncommon for titles to take 2 years to get processed. Doesn't mean you don't own the property, that we still register your promissory note, which is your purchase agreement with the lands department. But for you to actually get that physical piece of paper can take time. But it's all about expectations. And if you set your expectations properly and you understand that process, then I think you'll be a lot more at ease with it.
I'm so glad you brought that up with it taking patience. When I first bought property in Panama, it was back in 2015. Yeah, it did seem to take a year or two for me to have the deeds issued to the parcels that I bought there. Yeah, I do remember some other people that had bought at the same time remarking about how long it took. I don't know. I've got so much going on in my life. Those deeds came in. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I never did have those before. Okay, yeah, now I've got them now. That's a really interesting point about the patience part, but you do have those good property ownership rights there where you can hold title to the property yourself as a foreigner, which is something that's really important to a lot of out of nation investors. And you talked about some of the self-directed IRA structures that one would need to set up, but of course one could use cash as well. Or is there financing that's available to investors as well?
Yes. So we have two sets of financing available, just depending on which you prefer. We have 50% financing, 50. With that, interest rate is 4.9%. It's a 30-year amortization and a 5-year balloon. So that's one option. And then the other option is 80% financing, 80%. So you're putting 20% down. With that option, it's 6.9% interest, a 30-year amortization, and a 5-year balloon. There's one myth that I do want to debunk, which is that you can find these really great interest rates in Panama or in any country as a foreigner. If you're investing in property outside of your home country as a foreigner, leveraging is not cheap. You're going to pay quite a bit for it. And in this part of the region, I mean, there's the bank that we work with, their traditional rates are 10 to 14% interest. And it's high. I mean, it is high at the end of the day. And so we're happy that we were able to get it down to 4.9 and 6.9% interest. But just bear that in mind. And the recommendation that I give to clients is if it's a rental property, or even if it's not, just use the incoming cash to pay down the principal so you have a lower balloon payment at the end of the 5th year. Or if you're able to take out a line of credit, which some people do with their banks in the States, or if they're able to get a mortgage or second mortgage against their property in their home country, then you can always use that cash then and buy it, because your interest rates are probably going to be less than 4.9%. So there are some options. In addition to that, we do accept cryptocurrency. We've been taking cryptocurrency for the past 3 or 4 years here. So there are ways: cash, there's the financing, self-directed IRA, gold or silver, and then cryptocurrency as well.
I've been dealing in foreign real estate for about 8 years now, and the mortgage interest rates that you just described are the lowest that I have ever heard for foreign property. Of course, mortgage interest rates are low almost everywhere today, but that really is a remarkable and competitive rate for what you can get there. And Roy, Rachel, with what you're describing here, the thing that I like that you and your company does is you really act sort of as a concierge service or help hold the hands of people that want to invest outside of their own nation with helping them set up things like their self-directed IRA or financing. And you really help make it easy for people.
Yes, we do. And if anybody's interested in getting a self-directed IRA set up, we can certainly send you introductions to a couple of different companies. You can decide who you want to work with. In addition to that, one of the really big topics that we've been dealing with and people are really interested in is this concept of getting a second residency.
Yeah.
So a second residency, for those who've maybe never considered it before, is essentially a green card. Is a residency. It gives you access to that country. And so you can live there if you want. You can spend as much time there as you want. In the case of Panama's residency, it gives you the right to work. You can get your driver's license. There's a lot to having a residency. And even if you're not planning on living in the country, Panama has one of the best residency options in the world right now, where you only have to visit one day every 6 years. Want to make sure that you understand a residency is like a green card. And then it can lead to the path of citizenship. Citizenship is when you get a passport to that country. But this is just that jumpstart that journey, in a sense, jumpstart that residency process. You're able to get that green card through ownership of one of the tiny homes, as long as it's titled in your own name. And then from there, if you want it to lead to citizenship after 5 years, there are certain requirements that they ask of you. But in the meantime, at least just hold it as a green card. And I did my residency in Panama back in 2016. I invested actually through our teak farm, owned the teak, and then obtained my residency through it. And at that point, I was like, maybe I'll move to Panama, maybe I won't. I don't know, but I just keep it in my wallet. It's another form of identification.
Yeah.
And then, as we're getting close to the build period now of Freedom Village, what I realize is maybe Panama is a place that I do want to live or spend considerable amount of time in. Well, I already have the residency there. So it's just an easy plan B for people. I think that many times we're so concerned about protecting our assets, protecting what we have versus protecting our most important asset, which is ourselves. And by having options, by having a plan B, by just having another place you can go and spend time is something that is critical at the end of the day. So by having a residency, you are able to accomplish that. So through the home ownership, through the tiny home ownership, you are able to apply for residency.
It's just another great example of the concierge type of service that you have there, where you help people get started on their path to, if they do want that residency, it's something optional. And you do qualify for that if you do own that property deeded to you with these tropical tiny homes like we're talking about here in Panama. So Rachel, you put together a great report. I really encourage you, the listener, to get a hold of this report. If nothing else, look at the floor plans and look at the dreamy photos and just how it looks in Boquete, Panama. And then it also includes the pro forma for an investor and what sort of rate of return that they could expect if they plan to put their tiny home during parts of the year into what we would call the short-term rental pool and have that management integrated. So tell us some more about what one can expect in the report, the photos, the pro forma.
We have, oh my gosh, so many different resources, but the one great one, which if you want a great overview of the property, would be the general property brochure report. And in there, we have the location, for example. You see where exactly we're located. You see the renderings, the floor plans, the price, the HOA, everything that you really need to know when it comes to home ownership. But in addition to that, and I think especially for the people who are not really familiar with Panama yet, we do have additional resources. And I would request, when you send us a message to learn more, to just jot these into the notes section so our team can get them to you. But one of them is a Panama 101 webinar recording. As you can probably tell from the podcast, I tend to talk a lot. And so one of the things that we've done is broken up the segments and these different pieces of information into different webinars so that it's easier for people to digest it. So one of them that we did was a Panama 101 webinar. We talk about the top reasons why people are looking at Panama. We talk about the safety of Panama. We talk about home ownership, what it means to be a homeowner in the country as a foreigner. And there's just a lot of great information in that session. So we can always send you the recording that we did for that. We do host live ones probably every 2 to 3 months. So we can at least get you on the list to also join us for a live one. But if you would like that, when you're reaching out for more information, just put Panama 101 webinar in the notes section, and we can certainly send that to you. The other resource guide that I would highly recommend for anybody who is just starting to look at property ownership overseas is the Global Property Resource Kit. And within the Global Property Resource Kit, we have a section, it's a very educational piece, but there's a section there called the 15 must-ask questions when looking at property overseas. And they're the critical questions that as a North American or wherever in the world you're listening in from, that you just don't really tend to think about, especially if you're from a developed country. Like something as, is it plumbed for hot water? And, when you're building in North America, I mean, that just is normal. You have a line for hot water, you have a line for cold water, but that's just not necessarily normal in the building construction and methods in this part of the world.
Are there appliances already included in the kitchen? Yes, things like that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's true. And I can tell you here in Belize, in Latin America generally, if you're renting an apartment, you got to bring your appliances with you. You're bringing your washer, you're bringing your dryer, you're bringing your refrigerator, your stove. It just makes moving a lot more of a hassle. But all of these sort of questions are really, really important, but we just don't even know to ask them. And we have a saying in our company, and I'm sure many people have heard it, you don't know what you don't know, or we don't know what we don't know. And it's an obvious statement, but it's very humbling at the end of the day because we don't know. And especially if we're buying real estate in another country for the first time, it is important to ask these sort of questions. So if you are interested in getting that resource guide, Global Property Resource Kit, you just put resource kit in your comments section and we'll get it over to you. We have tons of those sort of resources. I could probably list 10 more, but I'll hold off and let you reach out to us so we can get those to you at another time.
And this tiny home community is included with kitchen appliances and hot water and those modern amenities that a lot of North Americans would expect, just to be clear about that, because this company understands who their clientele often is. You can get a hold of the report that Rachel and I are talking about and learn more about their webinars and everything else at getricheducation.com/tinyhomes. Get started at getricheducation.com/tinyhomes. That'll answer a lot of your FAQs. Yeah, so when we talk about availability, what are the price points of these properties? And we know here in the United States that properties have bidding wars on them. So tell us about price points and then actual availability for the Panama tiny homes.
Tiny homes start at $119,000 plus the closing costs and furniture. Do remember that you are able to finance it up to 80% as well. So there is that nice perk, but they are single family homes. You do get title to the property. Within this first phase, there are 24 homes. 10 of them at this point are reserved, so 14 available. Something I think that's important to remember is we're not the kind of person who says, well, if you don't get in right now, you're going to miss out on the opportunity of a lifetime. We have plenty of land. We're going to have the second phase, a third phase, a fourth phase. So if this timing is not right for you, still do reach out, and your prices may be a little bit more at the time that you're inquiring, but we are anticipating additional phases. And in addition to that, within this Grand Highlands property, there are projected to be condos, which will be launching in the next couple of months. There will be single family home lots where people can build custom homes. So just reach out and we can certainly fill you in on the latest. But just so everybody understands how the process works, typically we ask for a $999 refundable deposit. That gives you the right and the ownership, the right to that plot, that specific plot that you want. We send you paperwork. You have 7 days to go through it. If you don't want to move forward, then we'll refund you the deposit. If you do want to move forward, then we'll go through questions and whatnot. And then we have a payment schedule based on the progress of the constructions. We can certainly go through that obviously in greater depth, depending on what you're looking for and when you want to accomplish it by, but it's pretty easy peasy.
And then you also offer tours for people that might be interested in these so that they can go ahead and check them out.
Yes. And our next one is June 23rd to the 27th, 2021. And this one is going to be really exciting. We're going to be spending the first night in Panama City, then the next day going out to see the teak farm on the east side of the country. And then the next day, we're going to be flying out to Boquete and seeing the area over there, checking out the tiny home site, and then returning back to Panama City and checking out the city a little bit more in greater depth. So I would definitely recommend anybody who's interested, please join us for that. It's a great way to meet each other in person and also to meet other like-minded folks who are thinking about doing something similar. And if you're not able to join us for that June tour, or perhaps you're listening after the June date, let us know. And we do these tours quite frequently, so we can give you the updated dates. And in addition to the Panama tours, we do them in Belize and Nicaragua too. So if you're interested in other countries, let us know and we'll give you those dates.
Oh, yes. Whether you, the listener, end up buying property there or not, I really encourage you checking out the tour, especially if you haven't been in Panama before. If you're not aware of it, Panama Canal is pretty much right next to Panama City. So it's very interesting and convenient to do a tour of both Panama City and the nearby canal. And then, of course, take the short flight out to the western part of Panama, go up into the Highlands and see where the tropical tiny home community is. I personally find the weather a lot more comfortable out there where it's more mild in that western part of the country. country. Again, that's June 23rd to 27th, 2021. Rachel Jensen, it's been so fun and dreamy to talk about tropical tiny homes again. I'm so glad we could do it.
Fantastic. Me too. I'm so glad, Keith, that we were able to get back together. This has been fun, and I look forward to meeting folks in person and being able to travel around Panama together.
Oh yeah, great energy and positivity from Rachel here as always. So low-cost properties and really some availability when you can get an 80% loan on it. Like she said, you can use cash, IRAs, and cryptocurrency. Of course, you've got your closing costs and your HOA, much like you would in your home country. They also offer the convenience of adding a furniture package if you like. They make this easy for you so that you aren't running around Panama trying to put together a furniture motif for yourself if you don't want to do that. Some practical furniture for yourself or for renting it to others on that short-term rental basis. We recorded this show a few days before release. Like we learned, 10 out of 24 of these homes are reserved. If you might want in on this phase to reserve something at these low prices, or you just simply want to learn more, get started with that report at getricheducation.com/tinyhomes. You might remember that this is the same provider that offers that teak hardwood investment in a different part of Panama, where you can own the land and profit from the growth of the teak trees there. Learn about that at getricheducation.com/teak. That's TEAK. But you can't live on a tree plantation. So as far as what we discussed today, I don't know how many times in your life you're ever going to be exposed to an experienced provider that's done business in a region for decades that you can come alongside at these affordable prices. You can get started at getricheducation.com/tinyhomes. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.